I never imagined I'd be forced to sleep in the garage on my son's wedding night. As I stood there, shocked and heartbroken, the one person I thought would protect me, my own son, asked me to leave. How did it come to this? The day that was supposed to be the happiest of our lives turned into a nightmare that shattered everything I believed about family. Before we dive into today's story, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an amazing story. And if you're already part of the family, thank you for being here. Let's get started with today's incredible journey. The excitement of my son Albert's wedding day was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had watched him grow from a little boy into a man who was about to begin a new chapter of his life. I was so proud of him, and as a mother, nothing could have been more fulfilling than seeing my son so happy, surrounded by friends, family, and the woman he loved. The day had been filled with joy, laughter, and hope for their future together. But nothing could have prepared me for what would happen later that evening. I had always been there for Albert, offering guidance, support, and love through every challenge. I thought we had an unbreakable bond, something that nothing could sever. But as the night wore on, something felt different. As the guests danced and celebrated, I began to notice subtle changes in Albert's demeanor. He was distant, preoccupied, and not the same joyful young man he had been just hours earlier. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the stress of the wedding and the weight of this big step he was taking. But then, the unthinkable happened. My son, the one I had raised, asked me to leave. He asked me to sleep in the garage. I felt my heart sink as if the ground beneath me had suddenly disappeared. I tried to process his words, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "What do you mean the garage?" I asked, my voice trembling. His eyes avoided mine, and his words came out quieter this time, as though saying them out loud made them more real, more painful. "Amber and I need some space, Mom. It's better this way." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never imagined in a million years that I would hear them coming from my son. As the shock of his words settled in, I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. My son, my flesh and blood, was asking me to leave, not for a temporary moment, but to spend the night in the garage. I had always put family first, had sacrificed so much for Albert, always making sure he felt loved, safe, and cared for. And now, on the most important day of his life, he was pushing me away. The hurt burned deeper than I could have imagined. I had given everything for him, every moment, every ounce of my love and energy, and yet it felt like it all meant nothing now. Amber, his wife, had always been kind to me, but we never really had the kind of bond I had hoped for. I could never shake the feeling that there was something more beneath the surface. And now, standing there in the dimly lit hallway, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that Amber's presence was pulling my son away from me, making him choose her over the very family that had raised him. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremor in my words betrayed me. "Al, please. This isn't how I imagined tonight would go. I'm your mother. You're my son. You've always come to me for everything. What changed?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and exhaustion. "It's not like that, Mom. I want to start fresh. Amber needs her space, and this is how it has to be. It's nothing personal, I swear." His words didn't make sense to me, but his face, the pain in his eyes, told me that he was struggling too. Maybe not as much as I was, but he was caught in something that I couldn't understand, something I wasn't a part of anymore. The hours that followed felt like an eternity. I tried to keep a brave face, for Albert's sake, for the sake of the wedding guests still mingling and enjoying the night. I made small talk with relatives, but my mind kept drifting back to what had just happened. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just one of those moments where emotions ran high and things would return to normal once the wedding was over. But the deeper I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I had known my son his entire life, and in that moment, something fundamental had shifted. As I made my way to the garage, my heart ached. The coldness of the space felt like a physical manifestation of what was happening in my heart. I tried to find a comfortable place to settle down on the old couch, but it was impossible. How could I relax in a place so far from where I should be? I kept replaying Albert's words over and over in my head. "It's nothing personal, Mom. It's just how it has to be." I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation filtering through the walls from inside the house. Everyone was celebrating while I was left alone in the shadows. The realization that my own son had chosen his wife's comfort over my presence stung like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Anger, confusion, betrayal, it all swirled together. But most of all, I felt helpless. It was a helplessness I had never known before. As a mother, you're supposed to be your child's protector, their guide, the person they turn to when life gets difficult. But tonight, I was the one left outside, shut out, as if I no longer had a place in Albert's life. The minutes turned into hours. I heard footsteps approaching the garage, and for a brief moment I thought maybe Albert had come to check on me. Maybe he had realized what he'd done, and he would apologize. But when the door creaked open, it wasn't Albert. It was Amber, standing there in the dim light, her expression unreadable. My heart sank, but I kept my emotions in check. I wasn't sure if I could trust myself to speak without the flood of tears I had been holding back. Amber didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her gaze briefly meeting mine before shifting to the floor. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said quietly, almost like she was apologizing, but it didn't feel like a genuine apology, more like an explanation wrapped in guilt. I need things to change between us, Sarah. I need space. And I think Albert does too." Her words didn't offer comfort. They only made the situation worse. There it was. The truth laid bare. She wasn't just asking for space for herself, but for Albert too. And I was the one who didn't belong in that space anymore. The reality of the situation hit me like a brick. I had no place here anymore, no place in the new life Albert was building with Amber. It wasn't just about the garage, it was about something much deeper. Amber's eyes softened for a moment, and she took a step forward, her voice trembling. "I know this is hard, Sarah, but please understand, I love Albert, and I want to build a life with him. We just need our own space to do that. I'm not trying to hurt you." I nodded, but the pain in my chest was unbearable. I didn't know what to say. My son had chosen her, he had chosen his wife, and maybe he was right to, but it didn't make it any easier for me to accept. As Amber turned to leave, I heard her whisper, "I'm sorry, Sarah." The words, though soft, did nothing to ease the hurt. She closed the door behind her, leaving me alone in the silence. The coldness of the garage seemed to mirror the emptiness I felt inside. I had no answers, no way of knowing if I would ever be able to repair the rift between Albert and me. What was left for us now? Would he ever see me the way he used to? Or had this wedding marked the end of everything we once had? The night stretched on, and all I could do was lie there, staring at the ceiling, hoping for a resolution that seemed further and further away. As I lay in the garage trying to make sense of everything, a whirlwind of emotions took over me. The silence in the garage was deafening. Outside, the wedding reception was still going strong, but I felt worlds away from it all. I thought back to the years I had spent raising Albert, guiding him through every stage of his life. I had been there for every scraped knee, every late-night conversation, every tear and every joy. But tonight, it seemed like all of that was irrelevant. The shock of Albert's request still felt like a slap in the face. I had always known that relationships change when children grow up and marry, but this was something I wasn't prepared for. I had seen Albert grow into a man, but I never imagined I would feel so invisible in his life, especially on his wedding night. The sting of betrayal lingered, and I couldn't help but wonder how Amber had gotten so much control over him so quickly. Had this been brewing for a while, or was it something that had suddenly appeared? Maybe it had started long before the wedding, but I had been too blind to see it. Had I missed something? Was I at fault for not recognizing the subtle signs of distance between Albert and me? I felt a deep, aching emptiness in my chest. I wanted to go inside, to talk to Albert, to ask him why, to tell him how much this hurt. But I knew that if I walked into that room now, it would only make things worse. He had made his choice, and it was clear that I wasn't part of that choice anymore. As I lay there, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't Amber. It was Albert. My heart skipped a beat, and for a brief moment, I thought that maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he had come to apologize, to explain himself. But when he walked into the dim light of the garage, his expression was conflicted, his eyes full of guilt and uncertainty. "Sarah," he began softly, and for a moment, I almost felt relief at the sound of his voice. But the words that followed shattered any hope I had left. "I don't want you to feel like I'm abandoning you. This isn't easy for me either, but I've got to do this for Amber. She's my wife now, and I have to put her first." His words hit me like cold water. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to process them. "You're putting her first?" I asked, my voice trembling. I wasn't sure whether I was angry or heartbroken or a mixture of both. "Albert, I've always been there for you. Always. And now you're asking me to sleep in the garage like some stranger? How is that putting me first?" He looked down, his face contorted with a mix of guilt and frustration. "It's not about you, Mom. It's just, Amber and I need to start our own life together. We need space, and I don't know how to explain it. I know it hurts, but I have to ask you to understand. This is the way it has to be right now." The weight of his words crushed me. He was asking me to understand something that I wasn't sure I could. He was choosing his new life with Amber over the bond we had shared for so many years. I had always known that marriages change relationships, but I never imagined it would change us so drastically. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the sadness of the situation. I wanted to reach out to him, to hold him like I had when he was a little boy, to tell him that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. It wasn't that simple anymore. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet and broken. "I never imagined this day would come, Albert. I never thought you would ask me to leave, not on your wedding day. I don't know if I can ever understand this, I just don't know if I can." Albert's expression softened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the son I once knew. But it was fleeting. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, and without another word, he turned and walked out of the garage, leaving me alone again in the silence. I sat there, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. My son had grown up, and in doing so, he had left me behind. Not physically, but emotionally. He had chosen Amber, his new life, over the one we had shared for so many years, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a relationship I wasn't sure I could fix. The hours that followed were agonizing. I lay there in the cold garage, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I replayed the conversation with Albert over and over, trying to understand what had happened. How had we gotten to this point? How had I gone from being the most important person in his life to a stranger asking for permission to stay? The silence in the garage felt suffocating. I tried to sleep, but the hurt and confusion wouldn't allow me to find any rest. I could hear the faint sounds of the celebration inside, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and it only deepened the emptiness I felt. Everyone was inside celebrating, while I was left out in the cold. I wanted to be a part of that joy, but instead, I felt like I had been abandoned. In the morning, after a long, restless night, I decided I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to confront Albert. I needed answers. I needed to hear from him, not just through a few mumbled words in the garage, but face to face so I could understand what had happened to the bond we had shared. I didn't want to hold on to the hurt, but I also couldn't just ignore it. I walked into the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was quieter now. Most of the guests had gone, leaving only a few family members to help clean up. I spotted Albert across the room standing with Amber. They were talking, but as soon as Albert saw me, his face fell. I walked toward him, my feet heavy with every step. "Al, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm despite the tears threatening to spill. He looked at me, his expression filled with hesitation. "Mom, He didn't finish the sentence, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. "You owe me an explanation," I said, trying to control the shakiness in my voice. "You asked me to leave last night. You told me to sleep in the garage. Why? Why would you do that to me?" The pain in my words was raw and evident. I had to know what had gone wrong. What had changed? Albert looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Amber stood a few feet away, watching silently. "Mom, please understand," he began, his voice strained. "Amber and we've been through a lot lately. We're just trying to figure things out. And last night, with everything going on, we thought it would be best to have some space. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't say no to Amber. She's my wife now." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. She's my wife now. It felt like a slap in the face. This wasn't the son I had raised. The boy who would always listen to me, who would confide in me, had changed into someone who now valued his wife's comfort over his own mother's feelings. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My mind was clouded with confusion and anger. "And what about me, Albert? What about the years I've spent raising you? What about everything I've done for you? Have I meant nothing to you?" Albert's face twisted in pain, and I could see that he was struggling with his words. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just, everything's different now. Amber and I are starting our own life together, and we need boundaries. I'm still your son, but I'm also her husband. I can't be in two places at once." Amber stepped forward at that moment, her voice soft but firm. "I never wanted to come between you two," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "But I need to be clear. I'm not trying to take Albert away from you, but I need him to be there for me, just like you need him to be there for you. We're trying to build our life together, and that means making difficult decisions." Her words stung more than I expected. I had never been given the chance to express my feelings. Amber had made her point, and now Albert was caught in the middle of it all. The man I had raised, the person who once depended on me, had become someone I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath, my voice shaky but determined. "I raised you, Albert. I taught you to be strong, to stand up for what's right, to never forget where you come from. But now I'm standing here, asking you to look at me, and you're choosing her. You're choosing her over me. I don't know if I can live with that." Albert's eyes filled with tears, and I could see that he was struggling, but it was too late. The words had been said, and the damage had already been done. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Sorry isn't enough," I said, my voice breaking. "Sorry doesn't fix this." I turned away from them, my heart heavy with disappointment and heartbreak. The son I had always known seemed so far away now. The relationship we once shared felt like a distant memory, something that had slipped through my fingers and could never be regained. As I walked away from them, the weight of the situation sank in. I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way things were. But one thing was clear: our relationship would never be the same again. As I sat in the quiet of the house, the weight of everything that had transpired crushed me. Albert's words, Amber's presence, the garage, they all kept echoing in my mind. I found myself questioning everything I had done as a mother. Where had I gone wrong? Was I too involved? Had I failed Albert in some way that made him choose Amber's comfort over me? I couldn't stop thinking about the years we had spent together. Albert had always been my little boy, the one who needed me, the one who turned to me for guidance. I had been there for every first step, every scraped knee, every heartbreak. I had been the one who held him when he was sad, the one who cheered the loudest at his accomplishments. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. I had watched him grow up, watched him become a man, but I had never imagined this kind of distance would develop between us. The memory of when Albert first introduced me to Amber was still fresh in my mind. It wasn't that I didn't like her, I wanted to. She seemed sweet enough at first, a little reserved, but I figured she was just shy. I made every effort to welcome her into our family, to make her feel comfortable. But as time went on, I noticed small things, little comments from Amber that seemed harmless at first, but looking back, were hints of tension. She wasn't as open as I would have liked. She wasn't the type to make deep connections with family, and while I understood that people have different ways of expressing themselves, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't as interested in getting close to me as I had hoped. It wasn't just Amber, though. Albert's behavior had changed too. He started becoming more distant, not just from me, but from everything we had once shared. The phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. I kept telling myself it was just part of growing up. He had a life of his own now, a career, a fiancé. He was becoming his own person, and that was something every mother had to come to terms with. But I never expected it would feel like I was being left behind. I wondered if I had been too protective. Had I kept him too close for too long? Had I failed to let him grow into the man he needed to be without holding on to him so tightly? As a mother, you always want what's best for your child, but sometimes you forget that what's best for them may not align with what you want. Maybe I had made him too dependent on me. I had always been his safe space, the one he turned to when he needed comfort. But now it seemed like he was building a new life without me, a life where I no longer had a place. I thought back to the days when Albert was younger. When he was a child, I had been the center of his world. He would come to me with every problem, every question, and I had the answers. I was the one who made him feel safe, who taught him how to navigate life. I had poured all of my love into raising him, giving him everything I had. But somewhere along the way, I had failed to prepare myself for the moment when he would no longer need me the same way. I had always thought our bond would be unbreakable, that it would survive anything. But now, I wasn't so sure. I looked at the photos around the house, old pictures of Albert as a boy, pictures of the family together at holidays, birthday celebrations, and school events. Those memories felt so distant now, almost like they belonged to someone else. Could I ever get back to that place? Could I rebuild the connection that had been lost between us? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that things had changed, and I was struggling to accept that change. I had always believed that love was enough, that it could fix anything. But now I wondered if love alone could heal the distance that had grown between us. I loved Albert more than anything in this world, but no amount of love could change the fact that he was moving forward with his life, leaving me behind. And that was the hardest part to accept. Albert was no longer the little boy who needed his mother. He was a grown man with his own family, his own life, and it was clear that his priorities had shifted. Amber was now the woman he was choosing to build a life with, and I was no longer his first priority. I couldn't help but feel like I had been replaced, but even in the midst of all this pain, I knew I couldn't give up on him. As much as it hurt, as much as it felt like I was losing him, I couldn't stop being his mother. I couldn't stop loving him, and perhaps somewhere deep inside, I still held on to the hope that one day he would remember the bond we had shared, the love we had built together, and that he would come back to me. But for now, I had to face the harsh reality. The relationship we once had was no longer the same. The future was uncertain, and I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't ready to let go just yet. The days after the confrontation with Albert were long, filled with a heavy silence that I couldn't escape. I tried to go about my routine, but everything felt off. The wedding, once a symbol of joy, now felt like the beginning of the end of something I wasn't prepared to lose. Each day felt like I was walking through fog, my mind endlessly replaying our conversation, his words echoing in my ears. The hurt didn't fade. It only grew. I spent most of the time trying to hold it all together, not just for myself, but for Albert. I couldn't bear the thought of him seeing me broken. It had always been my job to be strong, to be the one who held the family together. But now, the pieces were slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. Albert and Amber didn't reach out. I waited, hoping that one of them would come to me with an apology or even just an explanation. But the silence stretched on. I knew Albert was busy, adjusting to married life, and Amber was likely adjusting too, but the absence of any effort on their part to mend things was like a dagger in my chest. Every time my phone rang, I half expected it to be Albert, apologizing, explaining that things had gotten out of hand, but the calls never came. It wasn't just the silence that hurt, it was the realization that I wasn't a priority in Albert's life anymore. As a mother, you expect your child to grow up and form their own relationships, but there's a part of you that never expects to be replaced, to be shoved aside. Yet that's what had happened. The wedding night hadn't just been a misunderstanding or a mistake, it had been a clear message. I was no longer the center of his world. I tried to talk to a few friends, but no one seemed to understand the depth of my pain. Most people said things like, "He's married now, Sarah. He's starting his own life. It's normal." But their words didn't help. They didn't make me feel better. Because it didn't feel normal to be shut out by your own son. It felt like a betrayal. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Was it something I had done? Had I pushed too hard, held on too tightly? Or was this just the way things went when a child grew up and built their own family? Maybe I had never fully accepted that Albert was no longer the little boy who needed me, but he had been my world for so long. How could I just let go? And then there was Amber. I had never felt a true connection with her, but I never imagined it would come to this. I tried to understand her perspective, but I couldn't escape the feeling that she had played a larger role in this shift. I wondered if she had been intentionally trying to separate Albert from his family, or if she was just doing what she thought was best for their new life together. The thought that Amber had influenced Albert to such an extent hurt almost as much as the rejection I was feeling. I hadn't raised Albert to be a man who would abandon his mother, but now it felt like that's exactly what he was doing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a night in the garage. It wasn't even just about the wedding. It was about the fact that Albert had changed, and in doing so, our relationship had changed too. I felt like I had lost the son I once knew, the one who used to rely on me for everything, the one who came to me for advice, for love, for comfort. That son was gone, and in his place was a man who was starting a family of his own, a family that didn't include me in the same way. It was painful. It was a kind of grief that I wasn't prepared for, the loss of a child who was still alive, but no longer needed you the way they once did, the loss of a relationship that had been the center of your world for so long. It was a grief that didn't have a funeral or a memorial, but it was just as real. I couldn't help but feel the distance growing wider every day. As much as I wanted to reach out to Albert, to try to fix things, a part of me feared that it was too late. I feared that the bond we once shared was irreparably broken. The reality was too harsh to accept. He had chosen his new life with Amber, and that meant I was no longer the most important person in his world. I tried to keep moving forward, but the weight of it all seemed to linger, like a shadow I couldn't escape. I had been a mother, a caretaker, a protector, and now I was left to figure out who I was in this new reality. What was my role now? Who was I if I wasn't Albert's mother? There were moments when I felt like I couldn't bear it anymore, moments when I wanted to call Albert and demand answers, to tell him how much I was hurting, to make him see the pain he had caused. But I knew that wouldn't help. It wouldn't bring back the bond we once had. It wouldn't change the fact that he had moved on, and I was struggling to find my place in his life. So I did what mothers often do in times like these. I held on to the hope that someday things would get better. That maybe, just maybe, Albert would realize what had happened and come back to me. That he would remember the love we shared and find a way to rebuild what had been lost. But for now, I had no choice but to wait. To let go of the past and hope that the future would somehow make sense of the pain I was feeling. Weeks passed, but the wound in my heart never healed. The silence between Albert, Amber, and me was deafening. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to understand why it had happened, hoping for clarity. My mind shifted between anger, sadness, and confusion, but one emotion never left me: the overwhelming feeling of loss. I had lost my son, not physically, but emotionally. The distance between us felt insurmountable, and I wondered if I would ever be able to bridge that gap. I tried to keep up with the outside world. I saw friends, went out for walks, and stayed busy with small tasks around the house. But nothing could fill the emptiness I felt. The pain of being left out of Albert's life was constant. I found myself daydreaming about the days when he was a little boy, when he would run to me for comfort, when I was the most important person in his world. Those memories felt like another lifetime, a time when life was simpler and I was the center of his universe. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I had to find a way to move forward, to accept that things had changed and that Albert had chosen a new path. I knew he loved me, but it wasn't enough anymore. His love had shifted, as it should, toward his wife, and I had to respect that. But how could I respect it when it felt like I was being replaced? I thought about reaching out to him. I thought about writing a letter, or calling, or even going to his house, but every time I considered it, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. What would I say? How would I explain my pain without sounding like I was accusing him of abandoning me? I didn't want to push him further away, but I also couldn't let this go on any longer. Something had to change, and I needed to make the first move. One afternoon, after spending most of the day in quiet contemplation, I finally made a decision. I would reach out to Albert. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I couldn't continue like this, carrying the weight of the unspoken words between us. I had to try. I had to tell him how I felt, even if it meant risking everything. I sat down at my kitchen table and took a deep breath. I needed to be calm, to speak from the heart, to let him know that I wasn't angry, but hurt. I needed him to understand the depth of my love for him and how much I longed for our relationship to be what it once was. I started writing the letter. "Dear Albert, I've been sitting here for hours trying to figure out what to say, but no words seem enough to express the pain I've been feeling. I know you've started a new chapter in your life, and I want you to know that I'm truly happy for you and Amber. I know it's not easy to balance your old life with your new one, and I respect that you have to put your marriage first. But I need you to understand that this change has been incredibly difficult for me. I love you more than you'll ever know, and the thought that I'm no longer part of your everyday life hurts more than I can say. I don't want to lose you, but I feel like I've already started to. I miss the relationship we used to have. I miss being there for you the way I once was. Please know that I'm not angry with you or Amber. I understand that things have to change and that you have a new family now, but I need you to know that I am still here, and I always will be. I want to be a part of your life again if you'll let me. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I do hope that we can find a way to move forward, together. I love you always, Mom." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. I wasn't sure what to expect when he read it, but I had done my part. I had opened my heart, let him know how much he meant to me, and asked for the chance to rebuild what we had lost. The next day, I mailed the letter, my heart heavy with anticipation. I wasn't sure if Albert would respond. I didn't know if he would even want to talk to me after everything that had happened. But I had to believe that love was still there, beneath the hurt, beneath the silence. As I waited for a response, I tried to keep busy. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I had to remain hopeful. I had to believe that the son I once knew was still there, and that someday, somehow, we could find a way back to each other. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had taken the first step toward healing. I could only wait and hope that Albert would understand, that he would remember the love we had shared all these years, and find a way to come back to me. Days turned into weeks, and still, I hadn't heard from Albert. The silence hung between us like an impenetrable wall. My heart ached with every passing day. The hope I had held on to so tightly started to feel like a distant memory. The weight of not knowing where I stood in my son's life was overwhelming. I replayed everything over and over, trying to understand what had gone wrong, where I had failed. I wondered if the letter had been too much. Had I put too much pressure on him? I had tried to speak from my heart, to convey my pain without anger, but now I wasn't sure if it was enough. Maybe Albert needed more time. Maybe he wasn't ready to face me or confront the emotions I had laid bare. I understood that, but the uncertainty was maddening. The waiting felt unbearable, like I was suspended in a moment that refused to move forward. In the quiet of my home, I found myself thinking back to the way things used to be. The mornings when Albert would run into my arms, the late-night conversations we used to have, the times when he would laugh and share his dreams with me. Those moments now seemed like they belonged to someone else, like a different life I couldn't return to. But I couldn't forget how much love I had for him. That love had never faltered, even as things changed between us. As a mother, you don't stop loving your child just because they've grown up and formed their own life. That kind of love is unconditional, even when the relationship becomes strained, even when the bond feels fragile. I had always known that one day Albert would leave the nest, but I had never imagined the emptiness I would feel when he did. As I sat there reflecting, I realized something that had been hard for me to admit. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't only Albert who needed to change. I, too, had to learn how to let go. I had to accept that he wasn't the little boy I used to hold in my arms. He was a man now, with his own life, his own choices, and his own priorities. And while that was painful, it was also a natural part of life. I had always been the protector, the one who held everything together. But now I had to let him go, even if that meant accepting a new role in his life, one that wasn't at the center anymore. The thought of being pushed to the sidelines hurt, but I had to understand that this wasn't a rejection of me as a mother. It was simply a part of the process of him becoming who he was meant to be. I couldn't force him to stay where he was, in a life that didn't belong to him anymore. I had to respect his choices, even if it was hard. But that didn't mean I had to let go of the love I had for him. The love was still there, and maybe, one day, we would find our way back to each other. Maybe, with time, he would see that I only wanted the best for him, even if that meant stepping aside to give him the space he needed. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I had to accept the change, to give Albert the freedom to live his life with Amber without feeling like I was losing him entirely. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I had to swallow it. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take another moment of uncertainty, the phone rang. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the letter I had written to Albert. I had read it so many times now, the words blending into one another as I tried to figure out if I had said everything I needed to say. My heart was heavy, but I had resolved to be patient, to give him space, to let him come to me when he was ready. But when the phone rang, I wasn't expecting it to be him. I nearly jumped out of my chair, heart pounding in my chest as I reached for the receiver. My hands were shaking, and for a moment, I didn't know if I could answer. What if it was just someone else? What if it wasn't Albert? I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Hello?" My voice was soft, tentative. "Sarah," came the familiar voice, and my heart skipped a beat. "It's Albert." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words I had wanted to say for so long, words of pain, of longing, of hope, were caught in my throat. But I found my voice and it trembled with emotion. "Albert," I said, the relief in my voice unmistakable. "I've been waiting for you to call." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened, about you, and I realize that I've been selfish. I've been so focused on building my life with Amber that I didn't stop to think about how you felt, and that was wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected him to come to me with such vulnerability. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I didn't realize how much it was affecting you until I really sat down and thought about it. You've always been there for me, and I've taken that for granted." My heart broke and healed in the same moment. "Albert, all I've ever wanted was for you to be happy, but I can't pretend like it doesn't hurt. I miss you so much." "I miss you too, Mom," he said quietly, "and I know I can't fix everything right away, but I want to try. I want to be in your life, in a way that works for both of us. I don't want you to feel like you're losing me. I don't want to lose you either." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but this time it wasn't from pain, it was from relief, from hope. "I love you, Albert. I've always loved you, and I'll always be here for you." "I know, Mom, and I love you too." In that moment, something shifted. There was no magic fix, no instant solution, but there was a recognition, a shared understanding that we both had to change. I had to let go, and he had to find a way to include me in his life again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something new. We weren't where we used to be. But maybe, just maybe, we were on the path to getting there again. Have you ever experienced a rift in your family that felt impossible to overcome? How did you find your way back to the ones you love? Share your thoughts, experiences, or advice in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories about family, love, and healing. Let's continue the conversation and support one another in navigating the challenges that come with relationships. Your story might just help someone else find their way.